Imagine you are about to set off on an epic journey across the ocean. You have weeks of food and water stored below deck. There is enough oil for your ship's engine to last the entire trip. And even though the weather might be rough at times, you know that your ship will make it to port without fail. This description fits any modern cruise liner traveling from Europe to the Americas. But these ships are actually recreating a form of transportation that was invented more than 200 years ago, the steamship. The first steam-powered ship was a small riverboat built in England in 1801. It was not fast or particularly large, but it had one advantage over all other boats of its time: speed. You see, when the ship was launched, it took with it the dawn of a new age, the age of steam. Over the next several decades, steamships like this would carry countless passengers and tons of cargo around the world. They would allow old empires to flourish and new ones to rise. They would even lead to the creation of new lands. For most of human history, if you wanted to travel across the ocean, you were at the mercy of the wind. Sailing ships could only travel as fast as the wind would allow them to. And even then, the journey could take months. But steam power changed all of that. Steam power came to seafaring what the printing press had done to books: faster, cheaper, and better. In fact, there was no limit to how big a steamship could get, as long as you had enough coal to fuel the boiler. In 1838, Robert Fulton, inventor of the first commercially successful steamboat, wrote to the British government about the possibilities of steamships. Said, "There is no reason why a boat should not be propelled by steam power at the rate of from 10 to 15 miles an hour, and why a vessel of 1,000 tons burden should not be propelled at the rate of from 5 to 7 miles an hour." His words would soon become reality. In 1846, the first steamship crossed the Atlantic Ocean. This was a monumental achievement and would have been impossible just decades before. By 1860, steam-powered ships were crisscrossing the oceans. They transported people from Europe to America in under 2 weeks, a journey that used to take almost 3 months. In fact, during the peak of the age of sail, most passenger ships could only carry about 100 passengers in relative comfort. But by the 1860s, steamships could carry hundreds of passengers in luxury. But the biggest change brought on by steam power was in how much cargo could be transported. Steamships could carry several thousand tons of cargo, 100 times more than the average sailing ship. These ships were able to do what thousands of oxen could not: move massive amounts of cargo up rivers. This allowed resources like coal and iron ore to be mined far inland and then shipped out to factories and mills along the coast. The United States was the first country to really harness the power of the steam engine because it had so many navigable rivers. For example, the Mississippi River runs nearly the entire length of the country. Many of the first steam-powered ships were paddle steamers. Paddle steamers use pistons connected to wheels that scoop water, pushing the ship forward. Of course, the downside to this type of engine is that it requires a lot of space, and the parts are exposed. So if the ship hits a wave at the wrong angle, the wheels can be knocked off. The first major American steamship company was the Steamboat Company. Founded by Thomas Jefferson's grandson, Peter Jefferson, the company operated on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. The first steamboat he ordered was named the New Orleans. It was 175 feet long and could carry 350 passengers. Soon, there were dozens of steamboats traveling up and down the Mississippi, carrying goods and people. The Mississippi would become one of the busiest waterways in the world. However, as the steam engine improved and the boilers became more powerful, the size of the ships also increased. It wasn't long before steamships got too big for the Mississippi. In fact, the river was simply not wide enough for ships to pass each other. To solve this problem, the Erie Canal was dug. This canal stretched from the Hudson River to the Great Lakes and connected the Mississippi to the Atlantic Ocean. Now steamships could travel from the Gulf of Mexico to New York City. But the real boom in steam power came after the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. The Suez Canal connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, allowing steamships to travel from Europe to Asia in less than 2 weeks. Before this, the only way to get to Asia from Europe was to go around Africa. But now, thanks to steam power, European nations could quickly send troops to their colonies in Asia. For example, in 1856, cholera epidemic swept through the British colony of Hong Kong. The British government acted quickly to stop the spread of the disease. Within 2 weeks of the outbreak, warships were dispatched to Hong Kong. With the first cases of cholera being reported on December, the British government quarantined the city and closed all businesses. By January, the disease had spread to India, where it killed more than 20,000 people. If steam power had not been invented, it would have taken months to get the troops to Hong Kong, and by then, the disease would have spread to the rest of Asia. Another thing that would have been impossible without steam power is the colonization of Australia. In 1852, gold was discovered in Australia. News of the discovery reached London, and within months, thousands of Europeans had arrived in Australia looking for gold. But there was a problem. There were no roads or railways connecting the goldfields to the coast. So the colonists did what they had done in the Americas decades earlier. They built a railway. The first railway in Australia was completed in 1854. This allowed the colonists to bring the gold they found to the coast and sell it in Europe. But while steamships may have helped colonize Australia, they also helped to end another empire, the Ottoman Empire. The introduction of steam power made it easier for your European nations to travel to Asia, but it also made it harder for the Ottomans to defend their empire. You see, the Ottomans controlled the Bosporus Strait, which connected the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. This gave them control over trade between Europe and Asia. But when the Suez Canal was opened, the Ottomans lost their monopoly on trade. In addition to this, the steam-powered warships of the West were too much for the Ottoman Navy to handle. Soon, the Russians, French, and British were taking over Ottoman ports and forcing them to pay high taxes. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire was completely destroyed, and the Middle East was split up among the Europeans. Now, steamships were not the only form of transportation that was developed in the 19th century. The railroad was also invented during this time. In fact, railroads and steamships complemented each other perfectly. The steamships delivered goods to ports, railroads delivered them to their final destinations. Together, they revolutionized global trade. But while steamships and railroads were great for transporting raw materials and manufactured goods, they weren't so great for transporting people. People preferred to travel by rail rather than by sea. However, this would soon change. In the early 20th century, new forms of transportation were invented that made it easier and faster to travel. For example, airplanes made it possible to travel around the world in just days. And later, commercial supersonic jets would make it possible to travel from Europe to America in just hours. Today, the vast majority of cargo is still transported by sea. In fact, 80% of the world's trade is carried by sea. It is simply the cheapest way to move large amounts of cargo over long distances. And the ships that dominate the seas today are still powered by steam. Modern steam turbines are more efficient and powerful than ever before, and they are able to turn out enormous amounts of power without producing much pollution. In fact, many of today's cruise ships are powered by steam. Of course, not everything is transported by sea. Much of the trade in the United States is carried by rail. In fact, the United States has the largest rail network in the world. But regardless of how goods are transported, they still need to be moved. And the development of the steam engine in the 19th century made it possible to move goods around the world at unprecedented speeds. So the next time you go on a cruise or receive a shipment of goods, remember that it would not have been possible without the invention of the steam engine. And if you want to learn more about another invention that changed the world, stay tuned for more information.